Good. So we're using the God argument, but again, I said I'm not God. So I don't believe in God for a moment. Yeah. Yeah. Good. So it's not right for me to do that? Okay. Wait, guys, listen, please, listen. Shh. Dialogue, but you have to listen to who's speaking. Otherwise, we're just going to lose control. Okay? I didn't make it interactive, so you can just tune out. Okay, that's all right. I'll keep going in the meantime. You go, man. Good. Yep, so it depends on which style of morality you go by. Good. But they also value their own life?
They value their own life, but they value the others as
equal to. Good. So equal to doesn't... So then the argument here would be that there's more lives saved than lost. So on a pragmatic basis, I would then give my life. Yeah, that's quick. That's
your opinion, but in their opinion,
good. Yes, you're boiling right down to the point, right? The problem with all sorts of moralities, and I wanted to take a couple of other examples. There's heaps of different types of moralities. Okay, you can justify many different things from different angles, based on, as Moheb said, what I think is better. Therefore, I judge my moral judgment. Okay, if natural law dictates what I do, then I will move according to natural law, and I will justify actions by that way. If it's for the greater good, then I'll say, well, more people will survive this way than that way. But sometimes they go against each other. Yeah. Good. But the preservation of life, there's a natural human law for the preservation of life. Plus, he might save more lives later. All right, I'll give you another example, a real life one. These are all just made up, but I'll give you a real life one. There was in the World War II, at the end of the war, do you guys know which country refused to surrender? The Japanese. Okay, Japanese would not surrender under any circumstances. It's like a cultural thing. We do not surrender. You could kill all of it. There's like a samurai story where if instead of surrender, I would rather eat a stone so that when you chop me in half, your sword would break on the stone inside me. You know, it's like this mentality that they had. So they wouldn't give up. Okay, so what did the US do to make them give up? They dropped a couple of atom bombs, right? They killed lots of people. Okay, in one day, thousands of people died. They gave up. Japan surrendered. Okay, now each day of that war, there was thousands of people dying. Every day. Hundreds to thousands of people dying every single day. So them dropping those bombs prevented more deaths, likely, than they killed, in spite of the fact that they killed so many lives in one day. Is it right or wrong? If you go just by the greater good argument, then you're defending that action. Do you see how you can't defend action based on that? Okay? All right. That complicated. All right? It is complicated. What's my point? What's my point? You can't then take two people's arguments, right, and say whoever's more clever will take that's right. Or if I'm going against you, in my mind, goes against your, so psychopath versus me having an argument. Who's right, who's wrong? If it's purely based on logic or reason, okay, then he's not wrong in what he does. Because his brain is telling him that it's actually, there's no emotion in this. So it can't be just based on what I think. There must be some sort of external reality. So those two scenarios, by the way, they should have been like really self-explanatory. Of course, you give up your life for the sake of those civilians as a soldier. Of course, killing someone for the contract is wrong. And we all know it's wrong. All of you from the beginning started laughing, saying, what sort of stupid question is that? You know, of course you can't. And we know that as a fact. What makes us know it as a fact? And across all of humanity, across all of cultures, we know that anyone that thinks that it's okay to murder someone for that bit of money for that contract there's something wrong in there. We know that. Intuitively, we know it. But what is the thing that makes us so sure of that? That's my question. Because it can't be just that I think that. There must be something outside of me that dictates that. Does that make sense? Does that make, like, are you following me or I've lost you? Following. No, I've lost you. Following, all right. So there's something outside of me. What is that thing outside of me? That if I disagree with you, there's a reference point. There's something outside that we can refer to say that this is right, this is wrong. What is that thing? Good? Yeah. But, and so that reference point is actually God. He is the reference point. You know, He is the reference point for, so even, you know, there's a philosopher who is non-Christian. His name is Immanuel Kant. And he wasn't Christian, but he said for you to really live morally through your life, to really live a virtuous life, you have to live as though God exists. As though God exists. Because there must be something outside of me. Yes, good. We got it. All right. All right. There's the pictures that I was going to do the same point with. All right. I'll just backtrack a second and then we'll get back into what I was saying. Is that beautiful? Is that like nice? It is, right? But if you take someone comes and says, puts their hand up and says, Abuna, that place is disgusting. Disgusting, right? And then you all laugh, how could you say that? And then he says, well, actually, when I was a child, I was in a place like that, and my parents got murdered in front of my eyes. So that place is disgusting to me. Right? Next. Is that like majestic? Like awesome? This one as well. It's like I just love watching leopards run. They're so fast. You know? Is it majestic? Is it wonderful? Yes. Right? You all say, yeah, not. And then one person says, no, actually, when I was a kid, that thing chased me. And you say, it's gross. I hate it. I want to vomit every time I see it. Now, if I find this thing not majestic, or I find this place not beautiful, what I was getting to is that there must be a problem in me, because we all recognize that this is beautiful, and it should be beautiful. It's not subjectively beautiful, it's objectively beautiful. It's as a fact, this is nice. As a fact, it is nice. As a fact, murdering someone is wrong. As a fact, sacrificing myself is right. It's a fact that we all recognize. The few people in the world who don't recognize that, there's a problem in them, and all of humanity has realized it. So they say, well, psychopath, we'll put you in prison. We need to protect society from you. The reason, and so what I was getting to is that the fact that all of humanity agrees on it, and we all have it inside of us, and we all understand it, is that is that there must be an external reality that dictates that. There must be an external reality that has laid that foundation. And that external reality, we say as Christians, is God. That God is the thing, the being, the reality that dictates that murder is wrong, that purity is good, that things are beautiful because He's created them beautiful. And then along the way, they get a bit destroyed by us. Okay? So there isn't, and that's what C.S. Lewis argues. So I said, bear with me as I work through C.S. Lewis' argument. What he argues is that if you say that those things are just subjectively beautiful, or there's not real wrong, or that murder is not wrong, you've lost humanity. We've lost ourselves. So as you see in the world around you, when all of humanity now, after 2,000 years or more than that, of agreeing that purity is a virtue, is a wonderful thing, suddenly purity means nothing. We're losing our humanity. Do you understand what I'm saying? So there's a practical reality to all I'm saying. I know it's all in the air, but there's a practical reality that all of the world is telling us that purity, who cares? As young people, why should it matter that I remain pure? That I don't enter into a sexual relationship until I'm monogamous and in marriage and until the end of my life? Why should that matter to me? Who cares? Victimless crime. But there is something that is an external reality that tells us no. No, there is, purity is a virtue. And all the other virtues. Got it? So what are these virtues that he has created? What are these things that he has dictated that are correct? And you can look at different ways. There's different lists. So for example, you got these, Catholic Church has this chastity, temperance, charity, diligence, patience, kindness, humility. You've also got the fruits of the Spirit. You could call them virtues. You know, love, joy, peace, etc., etc., etc. There is other things as well, like courage and justice and mercy and being hopeful and being faithful. All these things are virtues, okay? And what makes them, why did God choose them? That's my next question. Why did God choose these things? Anyone got an answer for that? Why does he care about your purity? We said that yes, that's a virtue and it's given to us that way. But why should he care if I have hope or if I'm pure or if I am honest? Why does he care? Love? Perfect. That's it. That's it. That's who he is. That's who he is. And that's why when he made us in his likeness, he made us with certain characteristics. Freedom, intellect, love, peace. That's who he is. You're meant to have peace. When you don't have peace, it's an aberration of the way God has made you. And all of humanity recognizes that. If you don't love other people, it's an aberration of the way God has made you. If I start to hate. Because it is who he is. He is pure. He is all these things. Okay? It is fundamental to who he is. It's a reality. It's not that he said, be these things. No, he is these things. And therefore, the more I am these things, the more I understand who he is. The more I am able to forgive throughout my life, the more I am pure in my life. Recently, I was talking to one of the priests, and he was saying that when you really want to interact with God, he said something like purity is not negotiable because it is who he is. You can't approach him attached to sexual temptation. You can't, because it's just not who he is. You can't approach him if I hate other people. You know, as we say, you can't come to the altar if you haven't reconciled, because it's not who he is. He's unified. So that's who God is. Therefore, it is how we are designed, because as JP pointed out, that we are made in the image and likeness of God. And that's what Genesis is all about. The beginning of Genesis is all about, is that humans are the pinnacle of creation because they have the stamp of God in them. Okay, because we have the stamp of God in us. So there's something wrong in me if I'm not developing these virtues. And it is, of course, to my benefit to have these virtues. As we said, peace, to be pure is to my benefit. To be loving is to my benefit. To be humble is to my benefit. So, for example, when you have the story of Saul. So Samuel's talking to Saul here. And Saul, he was chosen as king, and he was later rejected. And a lot of people comment and say, why would God choose him if he's just going to reject him? Why put him in that position? Set him up for failure. And the answer is that when you were little in your own eyes, were you not head of the tribes of Israel? So God says you were little, you were humble, and in that way you were suitable to serve me. But you changed. You had the virtue, but you changed. So it's to my benefit to have virtues. Okay? And I'll skip over that one. If you don't care about it, then you'll never have virtue. A natural strength is not a virtue. Okay? If you're born calm, some people come out with a calm temperament, and some people come out with an anxious temperament or agitated, like in Arabic, matasab, like just like asab. Yeah. Right? Some people are just born that way. Okay? And other people just chilled, relax, don't care about anything, And then you say, all right, that one person's peaceful and that one person is unpeaceful. Okay? In front of God, it doesn't work like that. God understands the full picture. Okay? He gets that this person has had a difficult upbringing. He gets that there's a natural tendency towards this way for this person and this person. But you know what? And I'm sure Abuna can vouch for this, that some people who have natural strengths lose them when they take them for granted. You lose it. Someone who's a naturally calm person all his life, but he doesn't care for being calm, becomes an agitated person. Someone who is pure by nature is a bit loose, loses it later in life. So it's very important that you care for virtue. You have to care. You have to want to build virtues. There's heaps of practical things you can do to build virtue, but you have to start by caring. You have to start by actually thinking that God is these things and I need to have these things. I must have courage. Some people are naturally courageous. Some people are not naturally courageous. That's irrelevant. But I have to build it. And if I have it, then I have to sustain it. I have to act on it all my life. That is what is real virtue. So in Matthew, for whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. It's a rule. It's a rule that if you don't look after what God has given you, it will be taken from you. And you see it all the time, that some people are excessively blessed because they use what God gives them properly. If they have a lot of money, they give to the poor. They don't let the poor suffer. If they have a lot of intellect, they help people, or they use it for the sake of God. They don't just use their intellect for themselves. Anyone can use their skills to build themselves up. But from God's perspective, that's a waste. You're not working on it, and you lose it in the meantime. Okay? So there's heaps of things that you can do to build virtue. One of the things, which I'm not going to talk about today, but is the whole idea of New Year's resolutions. People come up with all sorts of New Year's resolutions that they never fulfill. Like I'm going to exercise every day this year, and then 1st of January you don't even exercise. And then whatever it is, I'm studying or whatever. One thing I think is a good habit is a spiritual resolution, but it's actually choosing a virtue, any virtue. You say, I'm going to choose the virtue of prayer. Or I'm going to choose the virtue of love. And you just put this big sign up on your room wall, love. And so all year you're just remembering that that's the virtue I'm working on this year. And the second someone comes to agitate you and annoy you, love, I gotta love them. And you just try and love them. Or try and forgive them. The year of forgiveness. Or the year of... So, if you do that every year, 20 years later, you've tried to build up 20 virtues. So that's one practical way, but that's not what I'm going to focus on today. But that's one practical thing. There's a lot of other practical things, but there's one particular one which I want to focus on, and that's we'll talk about for the rest of the time. Okay? Is everyone still with me, or you guys are checked out? Okay. There's heaps of ways, but there's one I want to talk about, and I don't want this next slide to give it away because I want you guys to think. All right. There's a story in the Old Testament where Israel is lost, and this is where the theme. That's why my take on your theme, because I haven't said anything about being homeless yet. My take on your theme is that the whole idea of this virtue concept is that I know why I am what I am. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Otherwise, you're homeless. You know, unless you know that the reason why I love people is because God is love, I'm homeless. Because I'm just loving for the sake of social work. And after some time, I get over it. So you need to know why you are these things. Purity, especially young people, purity. Especially. Unless I know why I'm being pure, I'll get over it. It's too hard. The world is pushing me too hard to not sustain my purity. Whereas when I know clearly that that allows me interaction with God because He is pure, then my resilience is much higher. And I have a home. I have a linchpin. I have something that I can hold on to when I'm struggling. So, when Israel in the Old Testament was lost, okay, and they had no concept of who God was or how to worship God or to do anything with God, okay, there was periods like that in the Old Testament. There was a king called Josiah. He was a young king. Has everyone know the name? Does anyone know his story? Huh? Yeah, he was young. Yep, he was very young. And so as he grew up as king, he realized that the nation had no idea about what they were doing. And he said, guys, let's go and clean up this ramshackle temple that's fallen into disrepair. Okay, so they cleaned up the place. And while they were cleaning up the place, they found something. Does anyone know what they found? They found something that changed Israel for that period. Good. They found a book. Now, at the time, when you read it, it says they found a book. Right? They found a book. They just opened and they found this thing that, you know, like in the movies, they blow off the dust off it. And they opened it up. And what was it? The book of the law. Yeah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Okay? They opened up and they read this book. Okay? And when they read the book, it changed everything for them. Yes, that was, in our perspective, the Bible. Okay? But they read a book. They found a book and they read it. What I want to focus on as the practical thing that will allow you to develop virtue, to build virtue, is reading. Reading books. Books. Does anyone here have a book anymore? Like, do you even know what a book is anymore? You know, like, the problem is these things, you know, we used to come with paper for these talks, and I come with a phone, okay? No one knows what a book is anymore, okay? Yeah, some people do, yeah. But most people don't. Okay? Put your hand up if you've read a book in the last 6 months. Oh, you guys are good. So that's not bad, right? That's actually not bad. In the last 2 weeks, if you've read a book. Okay. No, textbooks don't count. All right. I'm going to try and convince you, for those of you who haven't read or who don't read much, I'm going to try and convince you that it's so important to read. And for those who do read, I'm going to try and convince you to read more. Okay? And to maybe adjust what you're reading, because often what we read is rubbish. Okay? You know, in America, when they decide how many beds they're going to put in a prison. So they're saying, we're planning for this prison in Kellyville, right? You know how they decide how many beds they're going to put in the prison? They go to the local public school, the primary school, and they say, all right, let's look at the literacy level of these kids, okay? No kidding, that's what they do. And they go by year 4, the literacy of the year 4 class. And they say, all right, only 30% can read. We're going to need a lot of beds in this prison. Okay? That's how they decide. Okay? You know, they reckon that the vast majority of your vocabulary is you develop it from communication, talking and whatever, by year 4. Okay? After year 4, you actually don't develop much of your vocabulary from chatting, right? Listening to people. The vast majority of your vocabulary after that point is from reading, the written word. Okay? The number one cause of divorce is, it's up there, communication. Communication. The number one predictor of occupational success is vocabulary. Could you imagine that? As if that, like, it's vocabulary. I would have thought it would be personality, but it's actually vocabulary. Okay? Why? Why is the number one cause of divorce, or what causes you to be a poor communicator? you don't have words. You don't have words or expressions. Yep. Not necessarily. Well, I'm building. Like there's other things. There's personality, there's emotional disorders, there's all sorts of other things, right? There's heaps of other things. But one of the things, a lot of those things you either can't, like it takes a long time to work on, or they're not easy to work on. This is an easy thing to work on. If I have words, I can get across to the other person that I am disturbed by their behavior without offending them. Whereas if I don't have words, I just say nothing. Or I say in a way that they can't. And that's what communication, a big part of communication is based on your vocabulary or your expression. Okay? And the same thing with work. The reason why some people who they're so clever, but they can't progress in work, is because they just can't communicate. And one thing that can help you communicate, I'm not saying it's the only thing, but one of the main things that can help you communicate is this idea of developing a vocabulary and expression list that you can work through. Okay, this is just reading in general, by the way. Haven't yet delved into spiritual things. But I'm talking about just reading in general. And then on top of all that, we said that it's so important to read, but only 33% of high school grads, 33% of high school grads will never read again after school, besides what they have to for life. You know, and that's true. A lot of us are like that. We fall into that. Like, yep, never looked at a book, and I'm just not a reader. Okay? And so you can imagine that a lot of people are not developing in that way. Okay? And so it is very important. You know, when St. Augustine had a crisis in his life, and he was, as you say, homeless. You know, he was a Christian when he grew up, and he spent his whole life trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong, and went through different religions. He was homeless. He just had no idea, okay? Didn't know where to settle. What was the moment that allowed him to convert? Does anyone know his story? There was two moments that changed his life. I got them up there. Yeah, reading. One, he read the life of Anthony, and it just overwhelmed him. And then at another crisis point, it says he heard a little a child playing outside, saying, has anyone heard the story? Saying "tole lege, tole lege." You know, in Latin, it means take up and read, take up and read. So he thought to himself, what sort of nursery rhyme is take up and read, take up and read? I've never heard that nursery rhyme before. You know, it's not Jack and Jill, you know, up the hill and, you know, take up and read, take up and read. What is that? It must be a sign from God. So he took it as a sign from God. And there were just these kids on the other side of a fence. So then he goes and opens the Bible, and he reads, I think, Romans chapter 8 or 13 or something like that. And his problem was his purity. One of the big things for him was his purity. And what Romans said was, make no provision for your flesh. And that moment, he gave up his life and converted. Where did it come from? It's this search through reading. Reading was a critical thing for him. Okay? Yes, he was intellectual. I get it. Not all of us are intellectuals, but it's a very important skill. Has anyone heard of this guy, Ben Carson? Yeah. Does anyone know his story? There's a video there. I don't know if... okay. Oh, that's great. This is so good. We'll have sound.
For the benefit of some of our viewers that may be just tuning in, tell us a little bit about who is Dr. Ben Carson?
Well, first of all, I'm a director of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins, a professor in multiple disciplines. But I started out as a little kid in Detroit, growing up in a single-parent home, dire poverty, pathological temper, poor self-esteem, all the markers of failure. Certainly an at-risk young person. But, you know, there were a number of things that happened during my life which I think precluded the failure that one would have predicted. Not the least of which was my mother. who was one of 24 children, got
Wow.
married when she was 13, moved from rural Tennessee to Detroit with my father. She discovered after a couple of years that he was a bigamist, had another family. That obviously was very traumatic. We moved to Boston to live with her older sister and brother-in-law. Typical tenement, large multifamily dwellings, boarded up, windows and doors, sirens, gangs, murders. Both of my older cousins were killed.
Wow.
It was that kind of environment. And she was working as a domestic, cleaning other people's houses. She didn't want to be on welfare because she had noticed that she never saw anybody go on welfare and come off of it. And she didn't want her life to be controlled in that way. After a couple of years, we were able to move back to Detroit, still in a multifamily dwelling with significant wildlife, but nevertheless,
Significant wildlife.
she was independent. I was a horrendous student. I just didn't seem to understand anything. And you know, it was that time where the transition began to occur because, you know, my mother knew that she had to work low-paying jobs because she didn't have the advantage of an education. She saw me going down the same road, my brother going down the same road, and she prayed and asked God to give her the wisdom to know what to do to get her young sons to develop themselves intellectually so they could control their own lives. And God gave her the ideal of turning off the TV, letting us watch only 2 or 3 TV programs during the week, and with all that spare time, read 2 books apiece from the Detroit Public Library, submit to her written book reports, which she couldn't read, but we didn't know that. And she would put little check marks and underline and highlight and stuff. But, you know, it made a profound difference. And in the beginning, I thought it was horrible.
Yes, I can imagine.
I thought it was child abuse, but it didn't take long before you know, I couldn't wait to get home and open those books because we lived in a pretty horrendous environment. But between the covers of those books, I could go anywhere, I could be anybody, I could do anything. I began to imagine myself, you know, creating new chemicals and discovering new galaxies and microcosms. And I began to know things that nobody else knew. And I went from the bottom of my class to the top of the class in a year and a half.
My goodness.
And, you know, it just tremendously changed my life. Of course, I then had a horrendous temper problem as well. And it was only through the grace of God that I was able to.
That he was stuck in a world, and what allowed the escape was this idea of reading. Okay, and you know, even from a spiritual perspective, you know, it's so important that when you read, you actually can't remain narrow in the way you do things, because it opens your mind to other things. Okay, I'm not saying just read any, like, yeah, look, I'm encouraging you to read not anything, but be widely read. But even from a perspective of spirituality and ecumenism, it's so important that we read about other churches and other perspectives, so that our perspective is broad. We can understand other people. We can see other things. For him, he broke out of a world because of imagination. Because of imagination. That it gave him that, I don't have to be stuck in this world. There's a few quotes from this historian, Thomas Carlyle. I'll just read them to you. Again, this is all just to motivate you to read. In books lies you already read. In books lies the soul of the whole past time, the articulate, audible voice of the past, when the body and material substance of it has altogether vanished like a dream. All that mankind has done, thought, gained, or been, it is lying as in magic preservation in the pages of books. So quick. I'll just keep touching. What we become depends on what we read after all of the professors have finished with us. The greatest university of all is a collection of books. You know, what he's saying is that it's everything. There's so much value in the things we read. Okay, there's so much value in the things that you sit down and contemplate on that you cannot get from other things. You can't just listen to lots of sermons and say, well, I just never have to read again. You know Pope Kyrillos? Pope Kyrillos is considered a man of prayer, you know, and he changed the whole church through his prayer, okay, through being quiet, humble, meek life. You know what he said? He said that you should persist in reading, if possible, more than in prayer. He's a man of prayer. So it's actually an ascetic discipline. It's a discipline that you have to walk through, and I think it's necessary. I think part of... Oh, here we go, we did it again. And he... that's all right, I'll try and keep touching. He himself read a lot. He seemed like, to some people, uneducated. He didn't get up and do sermons. He often refused, let other people do sermons. But he spent his whole life reading, especially he read this guy, St. Isaac the Syrian, okay, on prayer and the contemplative life. And he, you know, he was like a father to him from centuries before. You know, Pope Kyrillos wouldn't be the person he was today if he didn't read. He wouldn't be the saint that he is if he didn't read. Reading is so important, okay? Don't neglect it. The problem today is these phones. I'm telling you, it's these phones. We're a generation of, and I am part of the generation, that we are addicted and we can't help being addicted. It's not our fault. A lot of people blame us. It's not our fault. We were born on these things, okay? We grew up on these things. Everything we do in life is this, and you know, just today, I was looking up something on stays, and then as I was doing this video, YouTube video, I was just finding this Ben Carson video, I found an ad for stays. I'm like, man, you guys are controlling my life, you know? And it's not our fault, we're born on it, but there is a necessity that we control it by not only reading what's on this thing, okay? Not only reading the crap that comes on these phones. You know, the posts that people are sending and messages, and we have to read other things. We have to take our eyes away and read other things. Of course, the primary thing to read is, as I got the example there, Amba Brahm. Saint Brahm, again, he's a man of prayer, a man that gave his life to the poor. But there's other statistics about him that are so important. Okay, the personal spiritual life that allowed him to do all that. What was it? That he used to sit and read the Bible every 40 days. Like, that's crazy. How much time was he spending reading? Sitting and reading. It's an ascetic discipline. It's a spiritual discipline that we have to learn. Yes, read everything. Read books, novels, whatever you want. But you have to read spiritual things as well. The Bible primarily, but also other things. And it's in, you know, as we said, we started to talk on the idea of virtue. If you want to know what virtues are real and which are not, where are you going to get it from? I said it's God. Where are you going to get that from? You have to read the Bible. To know that God is forgiveness, you have to read a verse that says, He was to them the one who forgives. That's in the Bible. He was to them the one who forgives. It's a title. When he's dealing with Samson's parents, they said, what's your name? He said, I am wonderful. Why do you ask my name? I am wonderful. How are you going to know that about God? That's a fact, that He's wonderful, that He is love, that He is pure, that He is hopeful in humanity. All these things are in Him. Where are you going to get that from unless you read the Bible? And if the Bible is confusing, that's when you read the lives of the saints, for example, St. Isaac the Syrian, where he's talking about prayer and the experience of prayer. It's a necessary part of your spiritual life. So you have to spend time reading. And I hope that I've motivated you enough to develop these virtues, to have your direction, to have your home, to know that God is the source of my virtue. And that's why I live the way I live. But to understand that, to grow in that reading is one of the fundamental things you have to do. Okay? It's, again, in my opinion, it's not optional. We are a generation of people, of intellectuals, whether you like it or not, right? Most of you study, right? And use your mind for your work. Most. No, I won't say all, right? But most. Yet, we're not willing to use my mind when it comes to my spiritual life. pick up a book and read it, to pick up the Bible and read it, and to read deeply, and to think and analyze. And so we have to read. Any questions? And then I'll leave you with this slide. Any questions or comments or anything like that?
So how best do you consume the information in front of you? Some people learn by reading, some people learn by hearing, some people learn by doing the thing, and I think they're like limited at 5 or 6 or something, and these are the best ways you do that. What if someone is not a reader? Like, I'm sure teachers can tell you that there are kids that just don't absorb that, and or people in general. I
agree. There is, but I think the number of people that can genuinely say I'm not a reader are far fewer than actually do it, right? So you have a massive swathe of society. I just don't read, right? But they never tried to read. It's a discipline. As I said to you, it's a discipline that is learnt, that you have to actually try and do it. You have to build it. You have to read a lot to discover a genre of books that you can tolerate, that you can learn from. And then once you read more, you can understand more of what you're reading because the vocabulary starts to build and the expressions. And so a lot of that it's a discipline. And I call it a spiritual discipline because it's not just about learning. It's a spiritual thing. It's time that I spend in quiet, and it's not all just being entertained by sermons. I think some people love sermons because they're entertaining, not because they're learning, or it's just, oh, that guy's a mad speaker. Oh, and it's fun. It's like stand-up comedy. It's not what it's for. And it's a discipline. Part of it is work. I have to sit and work through books. Or yes, there's audio books. To be honest, I tried doing audio Bible once in the past, and I couldn't follow, so I just gave up. But I did one audio book recently, and I concentrated and it worked. Okay, so perhaps maybe that's one way for some people. But I think part of it is the discipline. Is the discipline that I sit down and I have quiet time and I open the book, and it's part of my spiritual path. Yes, there's other books which are not that spiritual, like novels or classics, or they're not necessarily spiritual, and you can't just like, oh, well, I'm just going to have some spiritual time, I'm going to read To Kill a Mockingbird or something. You can't get away with that. But I think it's a discipline that we have to build and we have to work on. There is a small group of people that it's not going to work for, but I think that group is much smaller than we let ourselves think. I think most people can be trained and taught to read, at least a little bit. There's some people who are prolific readers. They'll read non-stop. And there's other people who never, ever read. I'm trying to balance it, read a bit more. But everyone should be reading something. Always have a book by your bedside that makes you feel guilty every time you go to bed. Oh, man, I haven't read that book for 6 months. And I'm up to chapter 1 still, But at least it's there. And if I get the motivation, it's there. Or ask for recommendations. There's interesting books. There's different types of books. Lives of saints, stories. There's data. There's for example, if you want to serve, it's good to know a lot. It helps. And that comes from reading. Don't put a burden on yourself to have to learn information. Just sit and read. It transforms you. It transforms your way of thinking. I'm telling you, you cannot be narrow-minded if you read. You can't be, because you're just getting so much perspective in ways that you can't get from other methods, other mediums, because you really get into the depths of the mind of the person when you read what they write. For example, C.S. Lewis, right? His books, I love his books. The ideas, the clarity of expression, the thought processes, right? Great books. And then when I read his life story, I was so unimpressed, right? I was just unimpressed. And I thought, well, I just care more about what he's saying than what he did in his life, right? That was unimpressive to me. But what he's saying, the clarity of expression in the internal workings of his mind, helps me understand spiritual concepts. Even through some of his stories, the expressions, the spiritual concepts make sense more. There's heaps of other ways of doing it. So what I just want to encourage you to read. Is anyone unconvinced? Is anyone not willing to go and pick up a book and start reading? Oh, no way. Okay.
Osmosis.
The Bible, you can't say no to the Bible. You can't say, I don't read. Yeah, it's the Bible. Okay, that means you can read. Oh, then you have to read. No, come on, you have to read. If you're a teacher, you have to read. Because you have to encourage the kids to read. No, you have to read. That's a statistic I heard. I haven't studied it in detail.
No way. Like,
No way.
I, for one, I know, like, I think I didn't pick up a book from year 7 to like year 12.
No, but you read, between year 7 and 12, you read a lot because you had to.
Like, I did not pick up a book. I promise. I might have read a question, wrote a smiley face, that's it.
Well, that means your vocabulary in year 4 was excellent. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I don't know how true these statistics are. I heard it somewhere. I read it somewhere reading, but I don't know how accurate they are. Huh? It's true. Yeah. See, there you go. Thank you. So it's true, guys. You give her the microphone. Give her the microphone. Say it out loud.
No, your vocabulary doesn't develop after. I don't need it.
If you don't read past a certain point, your vocabulary will not develop. If all you read is Facebook and whatever else you guys read, then your vocabulary is actually going to get worse as you get older, right? You're going to become more retarded.
So we're speaking about things that we shouldn't read and things that we should read. I feel like we should.
Yeah, so I didn't touch in. Yeah, okay. So reading is very important, but there is, of course, a whole world of things. Like in the same way that we watch, there's a world of things that we should be careful of. Okay, there's a world of things in literature that you shouldn't read or be very, very weary about. Okay, because there's a lot of garbage out there. As I said, you get into the mind of the person when you read. So there's a lot of not good minds that there's no need to read what they wrote. I'm not saying be scared, read whatever you like, but if you find, for example, like there's written pornography, for example, I shouldn't read that, okay? There's things that are convincing me of atheism. Now, some of them can be useful in the sense of they can help me understand the external perspective so I can understand my position better. But sometimes it messes with my head. And then I should be careful. I should read more of the important things and be more clear before I start delving into stuff like that. So there's a world of things, and I think under the recommendation of your father of confession, there's recommendations there. And if you find that you're delving into like dark arts and things, well then you just say, you know what, I better ask Abuna if this is reasonable.
Last bit. Is there a point at which too much knowledge, perhaps from reading or from other sources, becomes a burden?
You know what they said to St. Paul, much learning has made you mad. Yeah. Yeah, look, it depends on my motivation, my intention. So some people, they read or they want to read a lot so that I can lord it over other people. I just have information and I sound clever and I'm going to argue everything that comes in front of me, right? And those people get lost in the knowledge. They get lost in it. They know a lot, but they're lost in it. And it actually destroys them. I'm sure Abuna has met people like that, but there's some people you meet, they can't, this whole idea of homeless, that they can't attach to a church. They could never commit to any church. I'm talking Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, anything, because of this just want to argue. I love the Orthodox, but blah, 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 all right. I love the Catholic, and they just argue against everyone and everything, and they can't find a home anywhere because of this concept of I just want to learn for the sake of learning. That's not what I'm encouraging you to do. I'm encouraging you to learn as an ascetic discipline to understand God more. You read the Bible more so you can understand God more. You read about prayer more so that you can interact with God more. You read about asceticism, you read about theology so you can understand who God is more. That's the whole purpose. If my intention is that way, I just want to get closer to God, you'll never go mad with the learning. It's only good for you. But if my intention is just I want to learn to lord over, to be cleverer than other people, to argue better, then of course you're wasting your time. Yeah.
Not really a question, just a point. When I was at uni, I was actually listening to a talk from one of the speakers, and they made a point that education and reading, constant reading, is actually the progressive understanding of our own ignorance. So that really stuck with me, I guess, in a sense that when you're constantly learning, you're understanding more and you're a bit more open-minded in a sense in comparison
I really believe that the more you read, the more you realize you don't know, the more you realize that your perspective is narrow, that there's so much more out there, that you could be so much better equipped to deal with things, you know. But if you don't read, you just get kind of stuck. You know, if you're, for example, work as a clinician, you work as a doctor or a pharmacist or whatever, and you have a set way of doing things, right? I've learned it that way, and that's how I do it. And I never read again what's out there. You might discover later that I've been doing this wrong all these years, or I could have done another way with a much better outcome, but I just never knew it because I just refused to open my eyes. I really think that when we refuse to read, it's like closing your eyes. There's a world of knowledge of God, not just knowledge, but understanding of God, that God has put in humanity to pass on to one another, about praying, about the spiritual life, about virtue, about what actually is virtue, that we're just kind of burying our heads in the sand and refusing to read because I'm not a reader, you know. And I think it's very important that we open that. And by the way, all that wealth of books is never going to be put in a medium or forum for those people who refuse to read. You might get some of them, but you're not going to get every book is done audible, and you're not going to listen to it anyway. You're not going to get everyone's sermon on every single book that's out there, you know. Of course, I'm not saying you're going to read every single book that's out there, but at least you have access. So, again, I'll ask again, is everyone convinced that you're going to go home and pick up a book? God bless you guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. Oh, yeah. Oh, the video. I've stopped this. Do you want me to keep recording? Okay. I'll stop. Yeah, I'll stop.
So, if I can bring it up. So the question was, Father, will we one day be condemned for not reading, exploring, and seeking God?
Exploring and seeking, yes. Reading, no. Okay, reading is not, you know, Jesus never, well, as far as I'm aware, it's not a commandment to read, okay? But put it this way, right? Even though it's not a commandment to read, it's a practical reality that it's necessary, okay? Will you be condemned because you never read? No. But it's like, for example, you're going into an exam, okay? And the teacher never said that if you haven't read the textbook, you cannot pass the exam, right? But you have to answer the questions to pass the exam. Are you going to be able to answer the questions having never, all right, some people say, I never read a textbook in my life, all right, lecture notes, or you listen to something, or you got some information from somewhere, right? You have to have gotten the information from somewhere. So you can't answer the exam without having read. Will you be condemned for not reading the Bible? If you're a Christian, my opinion, for sure. 100%. That you were given access to understand who God was in a very clear way, and you refused all your life. And then you stand in front of God, and He says, I do not know you. And you say, what do you mean you don't know me? He says, I don't know you, because you don't know who I am. Because there was a Bible, and you refused to read it. So how are you going to know who I am? Because of your intellect, because some people told you a little bit about me? It doesn't work like that. It's personal connection. So reading is absolutely necessary. Part of the Bible, definitely. Reading other things, I wouldn't go so far as to say you'll be condemned if you don't read. But certainly it's helpful in your spiritual life. Certainly. Will you be condemned for not seeking God? For sure. For sure. As a human being, one of the things that God has put in us is that we are desiring something outside of me. And that thing is God. If I ignore that and refuse to follow that, then yeah, of course I'll be condemned. Not condemned in the way that God is punishing and angry and whatever. More condemned in the sense of, I just don't know Him. I just don't know who He is. I hope that answers the question. Yeah. So, yeah, it's just a motivator, and then I'll leave you to whatever you guys do. It's on mute.
We've compiled a list of high-achieving individuals who attributed part of their success to the power of reading. You most likely heard the saying that leaders are readers, or that knowledge is power. These statements should not be overlooked. Even the good book says that my people are destroyed from lack of knowledge. So if you find yourself lacking in any area of your life, whether spiritual, financially, relationship-wise, in health, or your calling, pick up a great book and invest in your mind. Instead of being consumed by the plague of social media, here are what high achievers say about the power of reading a book. Will Smith: there are so many people who have lived and died before you. You will never have a new problem. You're not going to ever have a new problem. Somebody wrote the answer down in a book somewhere. Thomas Edison: when I want to discover something, I begin by reading up everything that has been done along that line in the past. That's what all the books in the library are for. Benjamin Franklin: from a child I was fond of reading, and all the little money that came into my hands was ever laid out in books. Fidel Castro: I'm almost nostalgic for those years in prison, because that's the time in my life when I had the most time to read. I read constantly, 15 hours a day. Frederick Douglass: once you learn to read, you will be forever free. Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. Rick Warren: balance your reading. Read broadly. Include people you don't agree with. This is how we are stretched. Anthony Robbins: as a young man, I decided I was going to read a book a day. I didn't quite read a book a day, but over 7 years I did read more than 700 books. Malcolm X: I knew right there in prison that reading had changed forever the course of my life. As I see it today, the ability to read awoke inside me some long dormant craving to be mentally alive. You will never catch me with a free 15 minutes in which I'm not studying something I feel might be able to help the black man. Nikola Tesla: of all things, I liked books best. Dr. Ben Carson: when I was a particularly bad student, my mother turned off the TV and made us start reading books. Warren Buffett: I do more reading and thinking and make less impulse decisions than most people in business. Mark Cuban: to spend $30 to give one idea that can help propel me and make my businesses better, it was a bargain. I'll read hours every day because all it takes is one little thing to propel you to the next level. Dr. Sunday Adelaja: every single day for 6 years, I spent 6 hours in the library reading. Ralph Waldo Emerson: if we encounter a man of rare intellect, we should ask him what books he reads. Barack Obama: reading is important. If you know how to read, then the whole world opens up to you. Strive Masiyiwa: sitting down that afternoon with a borrowed copy of the New International Version Bible, I sat down to read the Bible for the very first time in my life. I just read and read and read. Often I would read the whole day and the whole night. Finally, I finished it after about 3 weeks. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew: my definition of an educated man is a man who never stops learning and wants to learn. I'm not interested in whether a man has a PhD or not, or an MA for that matter, or a diploma. Mao never had one, neither had Khrushchev, nor Stalin. Bill Gates: I really had a lot of dreams when I was a kid, and I think a great deal of that grew out of the fact that I had a chance to read a lot. Winston Churchill: if you cannot read all your books, fondle them, peer into them, let them fall open where they will, read from the first sentence that arrests the eye, set them back on the shelves with your own hands, arrange them on your own plan so that you at least know where they are. Let them be your friends. To read the full article, check smartandrelentless.com and make sure you subscribe